All right, Studio Draxi here. Welcome to Blender. You guys are just starting Blender for the first time. It's something you're going to look at and be like, oh, there's too many things. There's a lot to do. I don't know how to do things. It's kind of a pain starting out. It really is. Like you have to get used to stuff. And I'm still learning to this day. I actually just learned something a minute ago. While I was recording the video the first time, I was like, wait a minute, I didn't know this is a thing. It's a thing. So now we know. Anyways, let's get this out of here and start fresh again. So you always start with a cube. First thing I want you guys to know is you can move the camera with the middle mouse button. That's going to be your best friend in here. Middle mouse button and then shift middle mouse button will pan the camera back and forth. So you can kind of look around different objects. And I would get used to just doing that. Just move around a little bit. Even if you just spend a little bit of time every time you log in, just move around, get used to it. Because it's going to make everything so much better. Your experience in here is going to be beautiful when you can move the camera properly. Something else to know, the tab will change you between edit mode, which is like selecting specifics, and object mode, which is like working with a whole thing at once. Like if you do modifiers, object mode. I recently found out that there's, let's see, array, when I add this in here, let's say I do, I don't know, 5 of them, a little bit of an offset. Normally, you don't get to see these in edit mode. And normally that's how it's set up. I didn't know that was a toggle. So I went to show that and then I was like, why is it there? And then I had to find it and I was like, oh, I guess you can turn it on. So there's always little things like that where if you just read the menus, get familiar with it, you're going to like save yourself so much time in the long run. Especially doing arrays, like that's another thing. Just using the modifiers properly, that's probably going to be its own video because it's super important. So let's say we're moving around here still, and maybe you get lost or you get to a weird spot where you're like, I just can't get the camera back to where it was. The right side period by the number pad there, that'll center everything if you have it selected, and it depends where the origin is. You see that little dot in the middle? That's where it's going to center it to. So just keep that in mind. That's how you move around. Shift. You can pan back and forth if you got like a real big object that you're trying to do stuff with. Middle mouse button, the scroll wheel, that zooms in and out. If you're like really far out, you'll move faster. And if you're really, period again to zoom in. Let's say you're like really, really close, like I zoom in so far to where I'm in the inside of the cube. The panning is like nothing. That's literally me panning right there. Like I'm still inside the cube. I'm just so zoomed in. So just keep that in mind that if you're not zooming at the right speed, you might just need to like relock into the object. And then you can pan at a normal speed. View should be nice and easy. But that takes a little bit to get familiar with, especially if you're hopping between programs. You go into like Unity. There's a different system in Unity, and I don't know, it's kind of a pain when you're switching back and forth for the first time, but you get used to it, and then you're like, okay, this is how we do things here. It's nice and easy now. Just takes a little bit of time to get familiar with it. We mentioned tab earlier. Another really important one. When you go into editing objects, tab is going to bring it so you can make those edits. Otherwise, in object mode, it's good for like maybe arranging stuff. Like there's not a whole lot you're going to do with it. Maybe scaling. You press S. That's how you scale an object. I wouldn't worry about that too much right away. Just make sure it's comfortable building it. And then you can always like scale it differently later if you need to. We were just working, me and a friend, we were going through some of the different stuff on his object, and the thing that he was working on, he didn't have any measurements. In the top menu here, viewport overlays, statistics, you can see how many triangles you're working with, which is basically every square face is actually cut into like 2 different triangles. So it's like how many triangles would it take to build the object you have, is what that's saying. And that's what's going to happen with like a renderer. So like if you load this into a video game, it's automatically going to cut that in half. It's going to have to build it with triangles. That's how it works. So it's just something to keep in mind. If you turn statistics on, you can see all that. You can kind of get used to it. And if I do an edit, I'll explain this in just a second. We can see it's got more triangles now because I added a different setup and it takes more triangles to build it. There we go. All right, what else do we need here? We're looking at the edit mode. At the top here, you're going to see vertices, like different selection types. These are edges. And the last one is faces. If you're doing face select, let's say you want to grab the whole side of it. Also, to grab is going to be G. You're going to need that one. So if you want to play around with an object, you just grab the side with G, and you can lock onto an axis. So up in the top here, we got X, Y, Z. You can use those keys to lock onto the axis. So you can say, well, X, and it'll lock the object onto X. And it'll say it up in the top here, along global X. If you hit it again, it'll do local X, which is like orientation based on the object. The object is like dead center and it's perfect orientation. It hasn't changed at all. So those axes aren't going to change. And then if you hit it one more time, it unlocks it, so you're just free moving. And stuff can get really out of like whack when you're just free moving stuff. So I recommend, if you're doing anything like architecture, if you're building out a little space in virtual reality or whatever you're doing, make sure that you're locking on if you need to lock on. If you don't, then that's fine. You're good to go. But something to be mindful of. Another good hotkey, Ctrl R. That's going to be your loop cut. You can then use the scroll wheel to give it multiple loop cuts. Let's say for some reason you needed to, I don't know, do some type of shape that required sections like that. You can then Ctrl R, make sure you're in line mode. I'm like pointing to the screen as if you guys can see my hand. And if you ever need to center this, because sometimes it'll get off center, you can just click away with like the right click and it'll just leave it centered. You can also open up these little menus when you do edits and stuff, and it'll say all the different things in here. So you could be like, oh, I needed more loop cuts, but it wouldn't let me. Okay, just go in here and type 25, it'll give it to you. And there's a whole bunch of little shortcuts and like things you're going to learn as you go, but just to get the basics down, I think that would be good. Let's say you wanted to grab around the outside of something. Alt key. You press down Alt right by the edge, and it'll wrap around there. And you selected the whole thing. Now that we know camera movements, we can move around it and check. Another thing we're going to want, the X key for delete. There's different ways to delete stuff. You have to think about what you're using. Like right here, we're deleting faces, really. We're in face select. We grabbed the 4 faces. And that should be totally fine because we already have points for everything else. So if we delete these faces, it's not really like breaking anything else. Sometimes you have to worry about what you're doing. Like it's going to be spots where there might be a vertice that's kind of holding a shape together. And if you delete a face, it might take out that one vertice and it doesn't know where to put things then. So got to be a little bit mindful of it. But worst case, you just Control Z like any other program, bring it back. You can do that quite a ways back. So be mindful of how long it's been. It's another good reason of why you want to save often. You can go back to a different save. But if it's like a short thing where you just messed up, Control Z, you can go back a couple of times. You could say, oh, you know what, that didn't work. Let's go back to edge select, Control R, and let's do less loop cuts because that was out of control. And we can't get it centered because our mouse is like always moving around. There's a couple of ways you could do that, but yeah, just right click. We'll snap it right to where the 0 would be. I don't know if that's even in here, but it'll line it up. You can also type it in there too. So let's say we do that again. Up at the top left, edge slide, you'll see that pop up. You could say, oh, we want to 0 this out. Just hit 0 on your right side keyboard and then enter. Nice and easy. So Good stuff to be mindful of. Rotate. Let's see. We hit tab, we go back to object mode. Let's say this is rotated kind of weird. And I'm like, oh, I want this to be like more of a diamond shape. I want to like rotate on this pink axis here. So we say, okay, R for rotate. It's freeform, so it's just going anywhere. But we only want to rotate it on that pink axis. Almost like sort of spin it over on that. So we say rotate on X. And now it's wobbling exactly how we need it. And then it's just basic math of like, okay, well, if you wanted to go to the other side of the square, that'd be 90. And you can kind of keep an eye on the rotation in the top left, and that'll tell you about what you're at. So you could be like, well, I think it's around here, but I forget what number that is. Well, you can see it's about 46.1. And then you think, well, okay, if I went to here, that would be 90. So half that's 45. Type it in, 45, enter. And now it's perfectly aligned to this. So it's just good to keep that in mind when you're building stuff, when you're moving stuff around. You can really be specific and line stuff up and get it exact. And it's hard not to be a little bit over the top with it, but it also helps in some stuff, especially like architecture. You don't want to be just kind of guessing the shape of something. You want to be like, it's exactly this. Because maybe you're doing stairs and maybe you say like, okay, we need it to go like an array modifier up the stairs to build a staircase. You need to know exactly what that angle is. If you want to like do an offset or something, you don't want it to be like, just wing it and see what happens. And sometimes you do, and then you piece it together, but just good to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. I would say that's important. If you break it, know how to fix it, you know, a lot of stuff like that. What else do we got here? Select all, that's another good one. So let's say we have an object here. Maybe we add a different object. We have a circle. I always do circle. Why do I do circle? We need sphere. Mesh. UV sphere. We could use either of them. And then maybe we want it to be bigger. When you first build it, you have it selected. S to scale. Perfect. And then G to grab. We can just move it over here because we don't really care where it's going. If we needed it specific or tied to this item, we could keep it on one axis or line it up specifically. But no, it's good to go. So let's say we wanted to grab everything. We just hit the A key. That's for all. Select everything. Grab the whole thing. A lot of times when you load in, you're going to have a light source and whatever you call this, a camera. I'm pointing to them backwards. This is your light source. This is your camera. That's important when you're doing like rendering stuff. If you're getting into here because you're doing like, I don't know, photorealism or like pictures, or you want to like generate video, pictures, any of the above, then you're going to want to keep these in here just how they are. But we don't need any of that stuff. If I go to like rendering, like we'd have to go through the whole situation of setting that up, but it's a lot of work, a lot of extra stuff to learn. And if you don't want to learn that, you don't have to, but just something to know that it exists. So normally when I load in, I just delete the camera, I delete the light source, because a lot of these I'm using in Unity. And mostly like the stuff isn't going to need lighting in here for me to bring it in Unity. It's just going to add extra stuff. So again, we hit A, selects these. We see objects 2, so we know that there's 2 in here. If we hit that and there were objects 3, I'd say, well, maybe we forgot to delete something, or maybe there was another object hidden. And you can look in the top right to see where that's at. If you're ever selecting something and something else is in the way, let's say we scale this with S and then move this with G into the middle. Maybe we can't see that, but we don't want to delete it. We're like, we just want to get to work on this. You click on an object, you can hit H for hide. Bam. And then Alt H brings it back. Those are good to know, especially if you're working on models and stuff where it's like maybe it's got clothing and you're trying to edit underneath the clothing, but you can't see it. So you're like, I need to hide it, but not like get rid of it. That's the way to go. You can also do it up here manually. I don't ever use this, but yeah, it's a little eye. That'll hide your different objects. So H. You can also use this in your edit mode. So let's say we had like just a face I wanted to remove because I was like trying to work on the inside of this object. We just hit H And then we can edit stuff inside here. We can just like sort of reach into the object and be like, oh, I just wanted to edit those things. If you're selecting multiple, shift. Another one you gotta know. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff in here. You want to grab multiple faces, shift, and then you make your edits. You say, okay, we're good to go. Bring it on back. Alt H. And then you can just click off to get it to work. Just like normal again. And you'll see 2 objects. We made this weird edit. Everything's good to go. It's just more stuff to learn, more stuff to practice. It's good to get familiar with this stuff because you're going to run into it with your models and you're going to be like, damn, how do I do this thing? And there's a lot of like little intricacies to learn. So try not to get deterred on it. It's about 15 minutes in. I don't want to spend too much time going over anything else. But if you guys have any questions, I think most important thing is learn the camera angles, learn how to move around your objects, learn the different modes and how to select stuff. Those are very important things. Anything else that we need? Extrusions. We're going to get to that at some point. That's important, but it's not like dire day one stuff. Hold shift, click a couple things. Let's say I wanted to extrude. I went a bad interval there. That's okay. We're going to survive. When we hit E to extrude, we can then sort of warp everything. Let's say we wanted to go from the center of that object. We'd maybe do extrude and then S for scale. Yeah, there we go. Now it's like sort of coming out from there. Maybe it's not quite right. We say, you know what, we need this to respect the center of that object. Let's go to, oh, that's global. I guess local. Transform point, 3D cursor. Active element, we could do that. That'd be the selections that we made. Median point is the middle of those selections. Individual origins, that would be each object respects its own placement. 3D cursor, that's going to be in the center. And we could do Shift S. Cursor to selected, and that's going to move it to those. Do this one, cursor to selected. Now it's in the dead center of the object. Now when we scale, it goes out from the middle. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's just over time. Then you say, oh, our camera, once again, I go to zoom in, camera's in a weird spot because of the edits we were doing. So we just click on the object, period. Now we're all set up. Now we can see what we're doing. Alt key, click, select edges. If we need multiple, we can hold Alt and Shift, and we can do that. You can say, well, maybe we just wanted every other one deleted. Maybe we have an object like that and we need to add faces back in. You could click any 2 faces and then hit F. And just add another face back in there. It's a long process, but you could go around and add all the faces back in manually if you needed to. Another quick way to do that, try not to add too many things in here. We hold down Alt, select that entire circle, and then Shift, select this entire circle. We can then Ctrl E, L, and that's Bridge Edge Loops. Brings up a little menu down here too. I haven't messed with a lot of this. Like in the many years I've been in Blender, I just never, there's a lot of things to mess with. And it's worth taking the time to learn a lot because it saves you time. If you're spending too much time doing something, probably look into it. If you're like, this is going to take me hours, look up a tutorial. There's probably a shortcut for it. Please don't spend 4 hours manually putting faces back together. See, if I hit the F there, it just puts faces underneath them. But if I do Ctrl E L for bridge edge loops, it just connects them to like the nearest face. Beautiful. And we can make that whole again with a little hat. All right, we're good to go. But yeah, just something I wanted to bring up. Some sort of beginner-friendly stuff that we can go into. I'm going to ramble for hours. I'm going to chop the video there. We'll see you guys next time.